good.
Hey everyone, my name is Nicole. I am the founder of Pretty Girls Get Sick. Um, Pretty Girls Get Sick is a community I created to have a safe and supportive space for women who deal with invisible chronic illnesses and disabilities. So I'm super excited today to interview one of my girlfriends, Kathryn Boss. I just love your name. I do. It's just like that's some boss vibes. Anyway, um, here on Pretty Girls Get Sick today, and we're just gonna have a discussion, just discussing what she goes through living with an invisible chronic illness and some just informative information about it because there may be someone else that has been diagnosed with the same thing and can find comfort in her story, her sharing exactly like the process of what she's been through that can help somebody else that has just been diagnosed or that is going through the same thing and just needs some information because we all know that you don't get all the information that you need at the doctor's office when you've been diagnosed or you're going through the process. So maybe when you're kind of hearing Kathryn's story, you may come back with some information to share with your provider or your specialist and say, hey, I seen an interview with someone and I think that it could possibly be X, Y, and Z. But anyway, let me not ramble on. Here's my girl, Kathryn. And Kathryn, can you please let us know about you? Let us know the diagnosis that you have and your journey with it. So it could go anyway. And I'm
Hi.
your friend, so if we start giggling in the midst of all of this, it's fine.
That is true. My name is Katherine. I have Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, or because it's such a mouthful, I just say EDS. It's a little easier. I was diagnosed when I was 17, which is actually really, really early.
Mhm.
And I was diagnosed on the West Coast, where I'm from, which is like a tiny little coastal town on the West Coast of Oregon. And I currently now live in Texas, East Texas, to be precise.
Okay. So you said you were 17 when you were diagnosed. Is
Mhm.
that usually late? Do most people diagnosed with EDS early on or later on? Because I've seen like a mixture of the two. And if you don't know, you're I know you're not like a specialist, but it's fine.
No, you're good. I was diagnosed early because I had had 8 surgeries my like high school career. And for the longest time, they thought it was like athletics and just my height. I mean, I know you can't tell from me sitting down, but I'm actually 6 foot tall and I was this tall at 15.
Oh.
And so they just assumed it was like growing pains was the thing. And then I had an orthopedic surgeon that was like, I've never had a positive MRI from you. Like you tear cartilage like it's your job. But again, he was like combination of you being a girl and like the sports that you play. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I just kept having surgeries over and over and over again. And during my junior year, my mom was like, something is wrong. And I was like, I agreed. Like this pain is continual, like it doesn't stop after surgery. And what I had done a lot was meniscus repairs because I had torn the cartilage. Like your normal cartilage like looks really soft and glossy, and mine looked like crab meat. Like it was just shredded to bits. And so we ended up talking with one of the physical therapists that's in my hometown, and he was like, hey, this sounds a lot like my sister. And my sister has EDS. And I was like, interesting. But excuse me, she got diagnosed from a geneticist. And so I went to a geneticist in Portland, Oregon, which is like 4 hours north of where I grew up.
Okay.
And he diagnosed me with EDS hypermobility because there's like 14 different types of EDS, not just, it's like an overarching type, basically. And the hypermobility is because I can dislocate pretty much any joint in my body,
Wow.
like frequently. Like my knees when all of this was happening when I was 17, my knees were dislocating so often that my knee would dislocate, I would fall and hit my head. And I had several concussions within a year, to the point where my mom literally made a lanyard that I could carry around the house phone with me because she was terrified that I was going to fall and hit my head, which I had.
Yeah. I was going to ask that, like, are you more susceptible to falls in general? Okay.
Yeah. So I can't really control it. It just happens literally out of nowhere. It's happened while I was stepping on my car. It's happened walking down the hall. Like there's no rhyme or reason. It just happens. And we also know that because of my EDS, like I did a lot of damage actually by putting my knee back in, because at 17, like it just gets old. Like it happens. You have to go to the ER. The ER puts it back in, and it's just expensive. And even at 17, it's like, wow, I am tired of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Continually. So especially at school, I would just literally grab my kneecap and push it back in.
Wow.
Which apparently did a lot of damage as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they made me stop doing that. And with the diagnosis, he had told us, he was like, just so you know, like your kneecap dislocating does damage. And there's a possibility that you will need your knees replaced. At 17, they told me this. And I was like, okay. But he was like, it'll be way down the line. Like, don't worry about it. And I was like, okay, great. So we ended up actually doing that, getting my knees replaced when I was 24, which is crazy. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry.
No, it does. It definitely does answer my question. So going back to what you're saying, the fact that you're susceptible to falls, I'm imagining it hurt because, just falling all the time. I could imagine that you just like always was in a great deal of pain. The surgeries, that's exhausting at such a young age. Your friends are running around, playing sports and everything else. What kids are usually doing at that age. And here you are going in back and forth for surgeries and really not understanding like what's happening. And grateful for the person that said, hey, I think it could be X, Y, and Z. And so the fact that like doctors never caught it, but it was somebody else that says this is what it could be. And that's what made you go ahead and go to your doctors and say, like, hey, I think this could be Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. And by the way, we had to like have a discussion. There's like, I was telling Kathryn, like, there's a huge discussion of like how you pronounce Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. People pronounce it in different ways. So I had to like ask her, but that's why people just usually say EDS or EDS. Okay. The fact that EDS is a invisible illness, right? And your symptoms. Can you tell me about like what other symptoms did you have? Like, do you go through chronic pain? Like how, like no one's going to know that you were going through something like this. So in your everyday life, like how did that impact you, especially at a young age? And now you're a woman. Like, how did that impact you with nobody knowing what you were going through, but yet you're still going through? You have something going on, because I'm pretty sure you had to make some adjustments just to make sure that you can be stable, and just do what you need to do in general.
Yeah. When I was in high school, it sucked because my high school, even though like I lived in a smaller town, my high school was 4 buildings and on like a hillside. So you had to like schlep yourself up like 3 stories of stairs to get to one class. So that was ridiculous. And my small high school is so big because Nike actually funds my high school. Okay. It's all about athletics. One of the runners that inspired Nike to exist came from my high school.
Oh, wow.
So it's just massive. And like schlepping from class to class was really painful. And then being on crutches and in a wheelchair was great because I got extra time to go. There is elevators, but I had to like have a key to get in. Like it wasn't like an option, I think, which is understandable. But probably like halfway through my junior year, my parents started noticing like just how much pain I was in. Because I've never really liked talking about it because I've had like friends and friends' parents like kind of turn into my mother. And it's like, no, if I want to do something, like I'll do it. I'll just do it a little differently. And so that was probably the moment that I started like internalizing it and like not talking about it.
Like when you said turn to your mother, like they didn't want you doing anything to not get hurt. So they were just overly trying to be protective of you.
Yep, overly protective. Like, stay on the couch, Kathryn. Like, do not move. And I was just like, nope, I'm good. Like, let me do me. But because of the pain getting bad, my parents sent me to a pain specialist in my hometown, which back in the early 2000s was definitely not as regulated as it was today. And he gave me 5 different narcotics to help my pain.
Okay. Wow.
And I was getting them in 3 to 5 a day. So it's like hundreds of oxycodone at a time. And it really helped, but it also was like part of the catalyst that like started my addiction. And I'm not blaming my addiction on the doctor, but I think the fact that I had like physical pain and also like emotional pain together just kind of bloomed it, because the pain was stifled. Like I didn't have chronic pain anymore. And I was diagnosed with that because of the Ehlers, like with the chronic pain. And mostly when, like, especially back then, there wasn't a lot of knowledge about it. They were like, oh, you're not in chronic pain all the time. Like you don't look it. Like, no, constantly. Like
you're just walking in there like your normal self. So they're estimating your pain based on how you look.
Yeah. Like they didn't even think it was possible for like a 17-year-old to have chronic pain. And when people ask me, they're like, well, what does it feel like? Like I kind of antiquate it to like radio static. Like sometimes it's really loud in my body and sometimes it's really not.
Right.
But the pills definitely stifled that noise for quite a while, until probably got it under control for like a couple years after that. But it's a different version of control than it was today. But yeah, it was really hard in high school. It got better in college, just, because like nobody cares. Like we're all there to do one job, like no matter how you get it done. But that helped. And then after college, it was a lot better. I was in a wheelchair for a little over a year, trying to figure out how to get the knee replacement to happen. So yeah, that's
Are there times, do you need to be in a wheelchair now? Do you need a wheelchair now? Because like there's sometimes they're like what they have now, what they call it dynamic disabilities, where sometimes you need a wheelchair, but you may not need the wheelchair all the time. I know you're a frequent traveler, so you're always going to the airport, and that's sometimes where I find myself that I usually need a wheelchair service. Not to say that I always need it, but then I'm always thinking like, it's going to wear me out, especially if the airport is huge. I'm not going to have the energy. Is it that way for you now?
Oh, for sure. I would say that I'm definitely more in need of those today, than I was 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. But I also feel like the stigma around it has changed like in the last couple of years. Like having a mobility aid, sorry.
No, it's fine.
Super helpful. I do have crutches that are pretty expensive because they're made for athletes. They actually have springs in the bottom.
Oh, okay.
Like regular set of crutches, and they look kind of like a shepherd's staff. Like they're, I don't know if
I can maybe pull it up. unless you want to, it's totally up to you. But
They're they're kind of shaped like this. Can you see?
I do know what you're speaking of.
Yeah.
Yes, I have seen those. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I have. And those are helpful.
Okay.
We've been looking at a wheelchair for me, but there's still kind of that stigma around it. But I think
Mhm.
it's because I'm used to people asking me, like, what are you doing in there? Because it's not like you're wearing a cast or anything.
Right.
Um, and being out in public, I've had a couple run-ins while I was in a wheelchair, or even like getting out of my car and getting in a wheelchair
Yeah,
without.
that part they expect you to be lifted up that, oh, well, she's okay to walk to
Yeah.
her wheelchair from the car. That means she doesn't need it.
They're like,
Yeah.
you're not really disabled. But I like my standard answer now, after actually being with a friend who was studying for the bar at the time, is did you know that because of the Disability Act of 97, you are literally not allowed to ask me that?
Mm, okay. Right.
Like the only thing that they are legally allowed to ask you is about a service dog and what the service dog is trained to do. That's
Right.
like,
Hmm.
there has been hundreds of lawsuits because people don't think. And it's like,
They
no, it's
don't.
not your
Hmm.
job. Like, I got a placard from the government
Hmm.
because of a doctor. Like, it's not an easy process being disabled. Like, trust me, it might look
Exactly. Like,
glamorous,
I don't
but
want to
it's not.
go, I'm not just going to make this up to go through this. There's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through just to make that happen. And I know exactly how that is. Even when it was time for me to get, I don't have one here in Texas now, but when I was living in New York City, I did have the handicap, the one that you hang over, you know, in your car, but I also had the other one where I didn't have to necessarily pay for parking, right?
Mm,
Because I was always at doctor's visits, and the hospitals out there are not like how they are here, where you usually have like parking. I would have to sometimes park blocks away, and
right.
I just couldn't do the back and forth. So, my doctor thought it would help me, but we had to jump through hoops
Yeah.
to get that done just because of the way I looked until they really examined me and they seen how weak I was. Then it was just like, okay, like you needed this yesterday.
Yeah. We've been looking at wheelchairs recently.
Hmm.
But the other thing is like, okay, it needs to be to the point where like I can do it by myself. So not something too heavy. And
Hmm. Yeah.
my husband is like super into tech. And so he's found one that's electric and it like folds down really small so it fit my car. But I
Right.
was like, that thing weighs 80 pounds. Like
Yeah.
that's a no. Like maybe some days I can do it, but a majority of them I can't.
Right. Yeah, and you need to remain independent because you're not going to always do something where other people are going to be around you. So you have to look at those things, and I can totally understand that as well. When I am looking at something, I'm like, well, how can I carry it? Is it going to fit? Can I do this on my own? And those are important. So, like with your doctors, how was that? Did you find them supportive of you while going through this? Like, how was your relationships with the doctors? Like, I know that you mentioned that one of them mentioned, or it could have been a few of them, like, you're 17. We don't believe that you're in pain all the time. Has that been your experience now as an adult? Do you find that, or is it with some physicians? Because, you have some people that I've noticed that had very bad experiences when it comes to doctors, but not everyone has that. How has your experience been with, in general, maybe more today than before?
I would say it's been a mixed bag. Like I've
Hmm.
had great physicians and I've had not so great physicians that I haven't
Yeah.
seen. Um, in moving from Oregon to Texas, um, finding new ones has been hard. I think I've gone through like 7 in the area that we live in,
Hmm.
because they constantly just want to send me to an orthopedist. And because of where I was before, like the orthopedist that replaced my knees was excellent, top tier. But not everyone is like that. And so I've probably gone through 4 orthopedists in the town that we live in because
Okay.
they just they either don't know anything about the disease and are like, oh, you need to go to a geneticist. And it's
Yeah.
like, sure. But the current problem I'm having is with my legs. Like the geneticist is just gonna send me to a physical therapist. Like I want to know
Mhm.
like your actual thought process,
Right.
or just keep making sure that like my components from my knee replacements are like where they should be. Like no, like this is in your purview of like your practice. And because of the amazing doctor that I had in Oregon, she like really taught me to like research like what you're doing and like have a list of questions going in. And
Yeah.
he's like, you're paying for their time. Like you can tell him, oh, I'm fine, and he's going to believe you. He's like, but if you don't go in there wanting certain things answered or having needs met, like nothing's going to happen. And
Right.
so the orthopedist that I currently use, I always go in there with questions like, hey, could you do this and this and this? And if he says no, I'm like, well, why? Like, isn't
Mhm.
that in your scope of field? Like,
Mhm.
what's going
Are
on?
they surprised like you when you do that?
Yes and no. One of
Mhm.
them is like, are you a doctor? I've gotten that a few times. I'm like, no, but I come from a family of doctors,
Mhm.
and um my siblings are very highly educated, and so is my dad. And I might be the black sheep because I'm not, but I'm just like, no, like if I'm spending money to figure
Mhm.
this out, like I want to know.
And we're partnering together. It's you and I working together to see what's going to be the best route for me to take.
Exactly.
And so I think that that's good when you do have that, and they shouldn't. Usually, that should be what most doctors want. And I do like the fact that your last physician said, "Come in there prepared." And I have like learned that because usually sometimes I would like there would be things that would happen to me way before my doctor's visits. And by the time I get to the doctor's visit, I totally forgot. Like I forgot something that may have happened, or maybe something that I saw or I thought of, and the visit is over. And then I'm like, oh, I should have mentioned such and such. So now I tend to keep, like, I have a folder within my notes on my phone that is medical health. It has the list of all my especially when it has the list of all the medication that I'm taking, because I always forget and they're always one, and I know exactly what dosages, but I do come with my list of questions or things that I have experienced since my last visit with them, that I felt like, hey, I just need to mention this. So I think that's another thing about just like being prepared. I'm gonna move on from the doctors, but like, is there something that uh, just in your journey in general, and maybe in the beginning, and that you wish that they told you in preparation of like how your life was going to be, or did you feel like once you had the diagnosis that you were prepared? And one of those things that I guess to make it a little bit easier is that I wish when I was finally diagnosed that I just wasn't given the diagnosis. I wish that there was some that my doctor at that time told me, hey, this is going to change your entire life.
Yeah.
You weren't sick before,
Yep.
but you may want to seek therapy at some point,
Yeah.
because this is going to change so drastically for you that if you find yourself sad, or just and sometimes we always look at being what is the word I'm looking for, when depression as just being sad. It's more than just being sad. But I wish someone in the beginning would have said, because this is going to make such an impact on your life, let us know if you have certain feelings, because there's something that we can do for that. We may need to put you on antidepressants, which is going to be completely normal, because now you're going from living one way to living another way. You may need to talk about this a lot more. So I wish that was a part of like my care package.
Mhm.
When they said, this is your diagnosis, this is what you can look up this information, but by the way, because this is going to be such an impact on your life, I think that you let me know if you ever need to seek therapy, or if you're having certain feelings, we can talk about it further. Because I feel like I didn't experience that until years later, or I was going through depression for majority of the time, but I didn't realize it. You know what I mean? So that's something that I wish that was said to me earlier on, or to seek or to just to seek therapy in general.
I wish two things. The first one being that there was better education about it, because like, yes, I got the diagnosis and I got the understanding of what I had that was the diagnosis. I mean, honestly, it was reading the diagnosis was like reading something about my body that I'd never seen in print,
Mm-hmm.
which was great. But outside of that, nothing. Didn't know anyone else. And I mean, granted, this was like in 2007, 2008. Like there wasn't an area to like talk to other people that were the same in the same zone as I was.
Right.
I had one friend growing up who had juvenile arthritis, and her and I kind of bonded over that, like that we had things going on that no one could really see, and we didn't really want it to like cut us off from things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really thankful for her.
Yeah.
And the second thing is probably someone more managing that, because managing the mental health part of it,
Yeah.
because I really think if there was more intervention there, and like someone else whose job it wasn't to give me pain meds, to be like, hey, that's too much.
Right.
Like, let's try something else. Let's do
Mm-hmm.
something else.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've just like shoved meds in my face.
Mm-hmm.
And to an extent, like it's still that way today.
Mm-hmm.
The last time I went to an orthopedist, the one before I have currently, I asked his assistant if we could look into a machine that helps my legs, that basically performs like it's called a Normatec. It does a really extreme
Normatec?
massage. Normatec is what it's called. Yes.
Okay. Oh,
Uh,
the one, the massage on your legs.
mhm.
Okay, I did see that when we were together. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That I asked her, I was like, hey, could I get a prescription for it and maybe get a little knocked off, because it's $1,000 for the machine.
Yeah, it's super expensive. Yes.
Yeah. So, and she was like, no, like we can try. And she sent it to the insurance, and the adjuster that called me was like, you realize that a prescription for low dose narcotics is like a 12th of what that costs a year. And I was just like, I'm a recovering addict. That is not an option.
Right, right.
Like, no, like
Mm-hmm.
I would love to be a normal person and take a pain pill, but I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a card carrying member of recovery. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is just not an option for me.
Yeah.
And the fact that like no one really like stood in that area,
Mm-hmm.
like is just astonishing to me. And
Right.
even today, like it's really not monitored well.
Mm-hmm.
I've been the one that has had to like push out and like seek other avenues than pain meds. But again, that's because of my recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know without a shadow of a doubt that that bottle will not do anything for me today.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that if I take one, like it's a short hop, skip, and a jump till I'm finding cocaine. So
Right.
I just wish there was more there, but I guess that's what recovery groups and like sponsors are for, which I'm thankful for. But I
Mm-hmm.
just wish there was like more education and knowledge within that. Cause you're right. Like there needs to be someone being
There's
like,
like these loopholes, there's like these gaps, and it's not to say that what those physicians did was wrong, but like when I just feel like that, are we looking at this completely like holistically? And the fact that, oh, okay, this girl, she's at this age, this is going to impact her life. We need to possibly have this and X, Y, and Z. And maybe if it's not just the physician, but just like other people within that health system or wherever they're at
yeah,
looking at it. I think that's why sometimes they're like there's like these health coaches now. I know a friend of mine, Lauren, that she's doing that, and she's a person that has a chronic illness, but she would actually like help a person um ask certain questions at their visit, and because of the fact that she's kind of gone through that process, she can like work with the patient, you and the physician together. So now that I'm thinking about it, me and Lauren need to get together, because I think that's like, I would like to understand a little bit more about their work, but I think that's why there's so many of them, because they do have like other people that the insurance pays for, that you get from your insurance, but I found that they're supposed to be like a patient advocate. Some of them
Mhm.
are really good. I'm like, you need me to be the patient advocate. Like, I'll do it. But I
Right.
don't
Must have
find them,
experience to apply.
yeah, I don't really find them being really much of a patient advocate. I find that like I'm calling them and I'm saying X, Y, and Z, and they're just like, oh, you could go to this doctor, that doctor. I'm like, well, I could have looked that up myself. Like, I need you to be the advocate.
Yeah.
Okay. We're almost coming to an end, but um, as far as you know, it looks like you have the support that you need from your husband, your family, which is good. And it's sad when I do hear that some people don't have that support, or even if they're married, just because you're married doesn't mean you necessarily have a supportive partner. I have spoke to women where they're just like, my husband just doesn't understand. I want to join your meetings, but I can't because like if he overhears such and such, he's just really not that supportive. Or, if I'm tired, um, he's looking at it that I'm just being lazy.
Mhm.
And, chronic fatigue and laziness is two different, or, two different things. It's not being lazy. It's just that that person just doesn't have the energy or they're always tired. So it does look like you have like a good support system um, with you. What about friends? Like, do you feel like your friends are supported? Did you lose any friends along the way? Because that's like another thing. And that's why I love that we have Pretty Girls Get Sick, because they have been friendships that have been built from
Yeah.
there, that I've even had friends where we're friends now and we've actually met up. Do you feel like you have that support from your friends?
I've definitely lost friends along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And certain new friends like kind of get fed up with like not
Fed up with
understanding,
what?
fed up
Like,
with like flares happening. Like they want to do things and it's just like last minute. I'm like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that today. Like, I'm sorry.
queen
Like,
of cancellation is what I call it.
yes, queen of cancellation. That is me. And especially in my older age, there's been a lot of like group trips and stuff. And I've wanted to go, but when it came down to it, it was like, no, my body can't handle that.
Yeah.
I've had to explain to several friends about this theory called the 10 spoons. And
The spoon theory, yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, the spoon theory. And I'm just like, some days, like, I just can't. And it's hard to explain to someone that's completely able-bodied that sometimes they just don't understand. They're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, you don't look like it. Like, come on,
Yeah.
like, let's go walk. And I'm just like, no, that's not an option for me this morning. Um, and I'm really thankful with the friends that understand it, that I'm able to be
Yeah.
like, hey, I can't today.
Yeah.
Um, and I am pretty busy, so that's nice. But normally I don't tell people like, hey, my body's not feeling it.
Yeah.
Because that never really gets a great reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And a majority of it, especially girls here in the South, tend to be like, oh, well, let me know if you need anything. I, I want to sarcastically and like uh I don't know, make a joke about myself and be like, well, I could use some new legs. Like, is that an option? Can you get me that?
Right.
Or like part of Ehlers, a lot of people that have EDS like have POTS as well, which is
Yeah.
like you need water and a lot of salt in your diet and stuff like that. And it's like, do you really want to go get me Under Armour? Like, I don't know what to tell you. So like that question always like kind of bothers me to this point. I'm just like, yes, it's sweet, but like there's literally nothing you can do.
Yeah.
I wish there was, but
Mm.
and I've popped off maybe once and like been super honest about it. But I feel like that's also like you and I are not from the South. We were born on opposite coasts. And correct me if I'm wrong, but where I'm from, like people don't do the Southern nicety, like, oh, bless your heart. Like that is not a thing.
Yeah.
And we don't talk to each other. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
not a head nod. We just drive past. And here,
Mm-hmm.
a whole different like show.
It is.
And it like minorly like grinds my gears because it's just like, if you don't really care about how someone is, why are you asking?
Right. Simply
And I've
do
had to
it.
like, yeah. And I've kind of had to like deal with that in other ways. And like, thank the Lord that we have
It's
found
definitely a
people.
different culture. It can be very nice, and you know, like you said, some people that just don't know, and it's nice when they do ask you, but then sometimes it's just like you can't help your sarcasm at times. And I think that Heather did say that she loves that because she never knows what's going to come out of your mouth. And she said that's why she loves you.
Yeah.
But I think that your friends would appreciate sometimes every now and then you just need to give them that sarcasm. But yeah.
Oh, I hope they do. Yes, Heather is right. You never know what's going to come out of my mouth. My mother says I have no filter, which is
My
very
mother said the
true,
same
unless
thing
I'm at
about me
work.
too.
And then I
Yeah.
have like the corporate filter.
Yeah.
Um, but I just, I didn't grow up. I grew up in a two religion home, and one of them was full of sarcasm. And so whenever someone asks me like, oh, how many languages do you speak? I'm like, oh, well, four, and one of them is sarcasm. Like, I'm great with it. Um, but self-deprecation is my favorite thing. Um, but anyway, I I just want friends, and I want a community that like wants to do life together and like
Yeah.
doesn't care about my EDS. And that's kind of what we've cultivated here.
Yeah. And I love that. And I hope that you get to come with us to the next Pretty Girls Get Sick meets. Um,
Yes. I'm
I
so
know
sad
you.
I missed that.
Yeah, no, we're gonna do something. I want to do something more locally, and then we'll do something again, like in Dallas. But every time I think of it, I'm just like, it can't be too much running around. Like it has to be this place. If I feel like it's, you know, sometimes I'll think of something and I'm just like, no, it just has to be one place and everything needs to be there. I can't do, you know, if I'm doing this today, I can't do that later on. That's it.
Yeah.
All right. Um, if you could offer any piece of advice to someone that has just been diagnosed with Ehlers or is going through the process of being diagnosed and they just haven't got to a diagnosis yet, what advice would you give them?
Trust
And it
your
doesn't necessarily have to be medical, it could just be like anything.
trust your gut. Um, be diligent with yourself because you have to self advocate. Um, I have a crazy Jewish mother who, if something's not right with me, she like fights so hard. And since leaving the home and getting married, like I've had to realize that like I have to be the mama bear. Like if
Yeah,
I don't tell them, if I don't yell for myself, like no one's going to.
yeah,
And you can't be afraid to like speak up. And when I found the surgeon to replace my knees, like that took so many doors to knock down, but it was completely worth it. And if you fight for yourself and you get yourself into the right place, like literally just going on Facebook and Googling like Ehlers-Danlos near me or whatever, there's so many groups and so many helpful things.
yeah,
And just being able to like even read, like I'm not super active in the two that I'm in, but I read them sometimes just when I need like a little bit of happy in my life. And
mhm,
hearing the girls that are doing great and hearing some of the stuff that the girls are going through, I'm like, hey, that's me too. Like maybe I should ask my doctor about such and
right.
such,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Just getting yourself out there, like, and especially because we have phones and the internet, like we don't have to do it in person, which is kind of nice. Like you can just be in the background if you want to, or you can join one of the groups and ask all your questions.
Right.
There's one specifically in Dallas that I've gone to a couple of times because it's just been like, oh, I don't know what I should do or where there's a good specialist
Yeah.
to find that. And yeah, so that's what I would
No,
say.
that's very good. And I think just also bringing it to what you said about, you know, speaking up for yourself, I think it could be very intimidating trying to speak up to a physician. You
Yeah.
know, I working in healthcare, just like working with doctors and you know, nurses, I had to get past that intimidation many points because you're just like, I can't talk back to the doctor, or, you know, you just feel like they know everything and it's to question them. You know, there's times where I felt in the past like maybe it's a sign of disrespect.
Yeah.
You know, so I think when you're talking speaking up for yourself and advocating for yourself, it's not a form of being disrespectful. And it's just about partnering with that physician, and what you're feeling, what you're going through in your
Yeah.
body. And don't be afraid to talk up, especially when needed. Don't just let everyone just make the decisions for you. And I do think that that is a process that doesn't necessarily always happen in the beginning.
Yeah.
But as you deal with them, especially with the chronic illness, I feel like these doctors become part of our family because
Mhm.
we're always seeing them, So yeah, I think that's very important. Kathryn, thank you so much for interviewing with me today. I heart you. It was super informative. I'm so happy that I heard your story, that you allowed me to share your story. So, ladies, gents, please go ahead. Pretty Girls Get Sick can be found on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. We have a private group for ladies only. It really kind of just splits my ears when I see just like random dudes like sending a friend request. Men, there'll be something for you later, but please do not try to join the group. It's for women only. We can also be found on TikTok and Instagram. Pretty Girls Get Sick. Thank you so much. I love you. The puppies, the dogs in the back, it has me cracking up. And till next time.
Love you too.